Well, hello there, and welcome back to Fabulous Folklore Presents with me, your host, Icy Sedgwick. Because May is Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, I'm exceptionally pleased to introduce you to Kamuela Kaneshiro, who was born and raised in Honolulu, Hawaii, and is host of the Legends from the Pacific podcast. So, Legends from the Pacific utilizes Kamu's cultural knowledge and television/film background to craft stories of people, beliefs, and traditions to help promote Pacific cultures. And he's also a descendant of the Hawaiian Chief Ka'iana. Now, Kamu obtained a B and an MA in communication from Hawaii Pacific University, studied at the University of Hertfordshire, and has appeared multiple times at San Diego Comic Con as an invited professional panellist. He's lectured on film, television, and Batman, and wrote the I Didn't Mean to series and genre analysis The Gangster, The Evolved Detective, and The Dark Knight. And he's also a magician member of the Magic Castle, which just makes him exceptionally cool in my book. We're going to get into some Hawaiian legends. We're going to meet Samoa's goddess of bats and talk about how popular culture can and does meet a cultural need for gods, even when people don't realize that's what they're looking for. Enjoy. Hello there, and welcome to Fabulous Folklore, the podcast for all things folklore, occult, and just a bit weird. I'm your host, Icy Sedgwick, blogger, fantasy author, and your guide into these rather mysterious realms. I've got some rare things to show you, so come on in, take a look around, but be careful not to touch anything. These things sometimes bite. Hello and welcome to Fabulous Folklore.
Mahalo for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. Obviously, just off camera, we've been having a marvellous discussion about Batman, so it's a pity that we weren't recording that.
Well, Batman, Harry Potter, Psycho, books,
Silence of the
Count of
Lambs.
Monte Cristo, bunch of other things. Uh, we went off on a tangent there. It was pretty awesome.
It's always very cool to talk about sort of films with fellow film people and so on. Um, And speaking of films, lovely little segue there. We're going to be talking a lot about sort of Pacific legends and so on in this chat, because obviously you do the Legends of the Pacific podcast. And I think it's probably fair to say that quite a lot of people possibly mostly know of Pacific Island stories thanks to films like Moana and so on. So, bearing that in mind, what would you love people to know about Hawaii and its rich mythology?
Well, Hawaii, well, before I get any further, I want to just state that May is Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month in the States. And that being said, I think it's really great that we get recognition or we get a chance to voice our heritage, our customs, our culture, which is essentially what my show Legends from the Pacific is all about. I am trying to uh, basically promote, that's our mission, is to promote awareness of that sort. Now, with Hawaiian mythology, it's interesting because it the mythology is shares sort of commonalities throughout the Pacific Ocean. We have the Micronesians, Melanesians, and the Polynesians, but they're all different. And that being said, a lot of the mythology was lost through ages, but also through, and no intention, I'm not throwing rocks here or anything. It was from Christian missionaries who actually were, offering a written language, but also they ended up mistranslating a lot of the mythologies because of regional aspects. So, for example, someone would say potato, someone would say, potato. And so now it's unfortunate that now they have like a lot of issues where people are saying, oh, that's the incorrect way to pronounce things and everything. And in actuality, there's no right or wrong way because we don't really know. And then another reason why a lot of the mythology was missing or lost with missionaries was because censorship. They felt that they did not want to, or this story did not fit well, or these words didn't fit well, this religion or this custom or this ritual was not fitting in their dogma. So they edited it out. And with my research, I've actually found out that it was difficult because you can see where these stories are like, oh, this is an authentic story. And it's like, this story talks about demons, devils, and like hell in some respects. And I'm like, that was not part of it, was to a degree, but not that plain cut. with religions or with Hawaiian mythology before colonial or Western contact. So that's the issue. What I'm trying to do with Legends from the Pacific is research all these stories that are fragmented, try to present a definitive or a close to complete storyline and present that so it's not lost. Uh, some people have credited this as the Asian and Pacific Islander version of Grimm's fairy tales. My mission is doing and everything. So
Cool. So this is probably a really awkward question, but everyone always does that. Oh, what's your favorite? So do you have a favorite legend from the Pacific, or is it too hard to choose?
that's like picking your favorite child, essentially. Um, and We have legends and we have haunted areas because you have to also remember that the Hawaiian Islands are small island groups and like a lot of deaths occurred. So it's essentially like one large Indian burial ground where it's like whenever you're digging something up, you encounter something. That being said, my one of my favorites would actually be like the Night Marchers, which are the deceased spirits of warriors and the ancient ali'i or chiefs or kings. And I've encountered them twice, and that was pretty interesting. And I think that I was with a paranormal group that would be hired, and um, we'd investigate like businesses or residences would contact me and or us, and we'd go out there. I also had my own private investigations, and it was interesting because I'm a direct descendant with Chief Ka'iana, who is King Kamehameha's right-hand man, most trusted advisor, and Jason Momoa is currently doing an Apple series about him. So I'd have to say that that's my one of my favorite uh, stories or legends. Another one would actually be Pele because I think that I encountered her a couple times. So I share those stories as well. But then from a purely like local aspect, the Waialae Drive-In ghost, which was a faceless ghost, which was the Mujia. I encountered her, and that was my um, first time I encountered a supernatural entity. And I'm part Hawaiian, born and raised, and it's we always say that if you haven't experienced something, then you're just not looking as a Hawaiian. And in fact, yeah, that I shared the story with the my first experience with all these experiences with my listeners and such. So books as well.
Oh, I mean, I just think the idea of like because I've heard of the night marches before, and just the idea of encountering them and just be like really like, so yeah, that happened, and I'm like, what? That's really
Yeah,
exciting.
yeah, yeah. That happened, and I was like, oh, there was once where I saw like a bunch of lights on the ridge and everything, and I was told later that that was with the detail that I recalled it with. Um, I was told that that was actually a rare version of the Night Marchers, extremely rare, which a lot of people don't know of, and that was the demigod version of the Night Marchers, not the Chiefs or the Elites. And I was just like, oh, fair enough. Okay. So, and that's the whole reason why my paranormal investigation group, had me around was because they knew my lineage. So, from being a relative or related to the Chief Ka'iana, who is allegedly supposed to be part of the Night Marchers, the group knew that I was going to be safe because I'm a lineage, and that's the way that you can protect yourself from the Night Marchers is if you are a descendant of the Night Marchers or your ancestor is part of them.
Mhm.
So,
So would that then protect them as well, or just you?
no, just me. They would use me as a shield. They told me flat out if anything happens, the first thing is someone grab Kamu because they know that I would stay, and they would use me as a shield as they ran off. And we actually had to run off one night. It was, yeah. So, because we heard the drums getting closer and such. So,
Oh
or
God,
what we
that's
heard was the
amazing.
drums. So,
Oh, I mean, on one hand, I'm like, that's awful. Use you as a shield, but on the other hand, you're like, eh.
I'm fine. It's like, I understand. It's like, wow, what is going on? And then they were like, we need to go. I'm like, why? Like, we need to go now. Let's go now. Okay. All right. Let's go. Fine. So,
I know you do have a lot of stories of ghosts and whatnot on the podcast, which obviously I'm like excellent because ghosts are always my favorite stories. Um, do they differ across the Pacific? Because I'm guessing obviously Japan will be something probably slightly different. And do you actually have a favorite ghost? Which seems like a weird question to ask someone, but do you have a favorite ghost in the Pacific?
um, okay. So, yeah, ghosts vary. Like, for example, the faceless Mujia does not have a face, and apparently she does not have, like, feet. And that is common with Japanese ghosts. They don't have feet. Various cultures from across the Pacific have different, their ghosts are all different. So it's like different characteristics and such. But I would say, like, yeah, once again, it would be the night marchers. That would be like my favorite ghosts, or even like the Mujia, because once again, it's a personal connection I had with them. And Hawaii is essentially a melting pot of not only people, but also cultures. And with all that going on, it also brought in a lot of their ghosts. So that's why we have night marchers, we have the Mujia, we have various things that we have demons, and we have these entity-like creatures from different cultures, and sometimes we can't even identify them. So it's um it's a melting pot of not only cultures but also the paranormal.
Mm-hmm. I think it's an interesting idea, the idea of people bringing their ghost with them, because I've come across people who've talked about fairy-like beings appearing in North America, obviously with Europeans going over. But you don't stop to think about, well, are they taking like their dead with them as well, or other supernatural entities, beyond that? And I suppose that kind of makes it a bit of again, a bit of a melting pot of the supernatural, I guess.
Yeah, I think that it was touched upon by Neil Gaiman in American Gods, I believe second season, maybe first season, where the immigrants came over and they brought all their gods and everything with them. So uh, that aspect rang true with me because that's something that I lived through and experienced growing up in Hawaii. So
Yeah, yeah. I know just before we started recording, you mentioned the thing about the Hawaiian leprechauns,
yes, the
which might be
Menehune.
worth letting people know because quite a lot of people have asked me about leprechauns for some reason, and I know Morgan Daimler talked about the Irish context, but how do Hawaiian leprechauns work or not work, as the case may be?
Well, so Hawaii has the Menehune, and the Menehune were believed to have done these amazing engineering feats in one night because that's what the lore was. They were forced spirits or small, leprechaun-like creatures or beings, humanoids, that would the elite would provide offerings, or the chief would provide offerings and say, I'd like this fish pond made, and in one night, or this wall made, and in one night the wall or the fish pond would be done. And that there are many places like that spread out throughout all the islands, and it's a great story. Through my research and everything, I found out that the Menehune did not exist. And that shocked me a lot because there are very Hawaiian folklore creatures, entities that are businesses are created. There's a lot of caricatures and such, but through my research, it was discovered that they were created around Arthur Conan Doyle time, which was the time when all these leprechauns or these folk-like, fairy-like creatures were in vogue, and they created that in Hawaii. And it broke my heart because they even had an Uncle Scrooge. They showed up in an Uncle Scrooge comic book, which is what DuckTales is based off of. And yeah, I think that there was other there were other force-like creatures like the Patu Pairihi who were Maori, and they were like leprechauns, and they were supposed to explain why they were. essentially seducers of women. And when they had blue skin and red hair, and when they would seduce a woman, that the woman would give birth to a Caucasian-like child with red hair, green eyes, Caucasian traits. But it was, and that they explained that that is the reason why the Patupaitihi were around, or one of them. But it was discovered that these Melanesians had a gene that gave these Caucasian traits out, and they're the only race out there with this gene that that was a they're essentially a non-Caucasian race that has this Caucasian gene that shows up in their genes. So
Hmm, it's quite interesting. I think that's one
yeah,
of the things that is you do often like run into these problems, particularly where sort of fairy light beings are concerned, where you're never quite sure, is this from fiction, is this from folklore, have they had a weird kind of crossover type thing? Um, and I suppose, given the sheer size of the Pacific, because I think obviously in Europe we sometimes forget quite how many cultures are involved in the Pacific, and because we're obviously a little bit more concerned with the Atlantic, I think. And obviously you cover the whole of the Pacific. So do you see a lot of similarities in the stories across such a vast space? Or do you think it's more important to look at the stories in their cultural context? Because I know there's a really awful European tendency to be like, oh, we've got a story like that, and we've got a story like that, to try and see the similarities. Because I think in some cases, particularly the death related characters, there's, I think it's such a universal thing that, the similarities are obvious. So, yeah, so that's basically like my question, I guess. Should we look for similarities or just honor them as the beings and entities and so on that they are?
I think that we can actually do both, just to a degree, because you have to understand where everybody came from. So, for example, a lot of the Japanese customs, gods, and such originated in India. And that was because of trade routes. And when trade occurs, religion occurs and follows and such. And so it went from India to China, and then China to spread to Korea as well as Japan. So they're essentially talking about the same gods but different names. And to a degree where after a while it evolved. Um, Buddha, for example, whenever a lot of I mentioned this in our Christmas episode recently. When people think of Buddha, they think of a large, jovial, heavy-set individual, but that is not Buddha. Uh, the actual Buddha was Siddhartha, and the large Buddha that we think of was Bodhi, and he was a follower of Buddha. And they say that, and so that's why, like, how things are interpreted, what changes and such. With Hawaiians, they were essentially Polynesians that came from Tahiti, and so a lot of our stories and our mythology are similar to Tahiti, but they're different. And they actually say that there's uh, gods and demigods say that they will come to Tahiti, or they came from Tahiti, or went to Tahiti, or are going to Tahiti. Lono, for example, showed up. Lono is one of the four major gods for Hawaiian mythology. He showed up and he essentially was killed his wife because she was unfaithful to him. And before he could leave, they found out that, or the Hawaiian said that you killed an individual, and he demanded to challenge everybody for his right to live. So he went throughout all the islands and challenged whoever he wanted to in any skill, any feat they wanted to, intellectual, physical, whatever. And he bested all the Hawaiians, and he said that I am going to go to Tahiti now. And so he left, and then Captain James Cook showed up, who actually was from Tahiti when they asked, and so that added to the whole belief that Cook was Lono. So, and so you have a lot of shared demigods, a lot of shared stories, a lot of shared land masses uh, between Hawaii, Tahiti, Samoa, the Maoris, and all the way down to Indonesia. There was in Bali, there was actually some. I made a connection with Bali having these raised canoe petroglyphs on these stone temples that we're seeing in other Pacific cultures. And so we see all that in the Pacific, and then we see some of the Inuits as well, or and they have a lot of similar gods and demigods and everything. So once again, if you can actually respect and understand the migrations and see similarities, but at the same time respect them separately for who they are and everything. So
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So this is probably a really awkward question, but with all of those stories and possible locations, how do you decide which story that you're going to tell next on the podcast?
I basically look at the calendar and see if there's something going on. So, for example, May, as I stated before, is Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. So I try to do stuff that's Hawaiian history, Hawaiian focused. I usually talk about Duke Kahanamoku, um, who why is he considered a legend? I mentioned Eddie Aikau, who was a lot of people may not know him, but that there's a term that's Eddie would go, and the Kamehamehas, the Kamehameha the Great, and the history. So that's May usually. For Halloween time, I'll try to find like demigods, ghosts, more of the scarier stories. But I also try to separate or spread out the stories, so it's not like, with the exception of May being Hawaiian, 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 Hawaiian. Uh, I try to like do okay. My last thing was Korean. All right, now I'm gonna go. I'll try to do an Inuit one. Okay, now I'll try to do a Native American one. I'll try to separate them, and I'll also see what did well. Like, what are the more popular episodes, and I'll try to like expand on that because there's so many ways I can go as far as like not only cultures, religions, but also deities and spirits and such. So that's why I'm always like I'm sort of all over the place. But the worst is when I do a deep dive into something and there's absolutely nothing there and I just wasted all that time and I'm just like, "Oh, now I have to I'm starting from zero now and uh an episode is due." Right. And it takes me about 30 hours a week to do one 12-minute episode because it's it's research of religion, culture, and history, which are the worst things you can have a podcast about because of all the research. And it's just like, so
Wow, I mean, I think that's what always fascinates me when because I looked at the spread of what you've got on the podcast and I was like, wow, you cover a lot of places here. So that's why I thought I'd find out how you do it because I started dividing mine into themes kind of by accident and then it stuck. A lot of the things I do are by accident and then they stick. So I'm always fascinated to see how um other people who are probably a bit more professional than me do things. Um, but with
I'm
obviously
all over the place as well. It's just like,
best
yeah.
way to be.
And then the worst part is I'll have a whole bunch of stuff researched and I'm like, yeah. And then it's like, oh, um, Hawaii is next month. I I guess I'll put this on the side and pull up my Hawaiian notes and everything. Right. And then it's like, okay, do I go back to this now? Okay, maybe I can. So
Mm. So again, with all, it's an awful question because it's another favorite of, um, and as I mentioned before, that I really love all the ghosts and psychopomps in particular are a big favorite of mine. What would you say is your favorite type of folklore or mythology? Because I know some people do separate the two, and I think that there's reasons for that. So, what would be your favorite and why?
I think that I like to see connections. So the connections that we were mentioning beforehand of how something came to be, I really like that a lot because it answers a question of, oh, that's why that place is named like that instead of just a name. And a lot of people don't know that, especially people in Hawaii. Dollars to donuts, if you listen to like most listeners that listen to all my Hawaiian episodes and uh, well, basically a lot of things, but mainly the Hawaiian ones, you'll know more in that than I would say like most locals because people just it's not taught. I attended a Kamehameha schools for a while, which is a Hawaiian's only private school, and I was essentially taught Hawaiian history before American history and world history. So that that was kind of a unique experience that I had. And then I discovered later on in intermediate and such that that was that at that point it was taught upon us, and it was just like, wow, I learned this like way back when. So, but yeah, it's um with the stories and everything, with the ghosts and stuff. I just like to know why. Why is it like this? Why is something in Hawaii called a tiki, but there's or a kiki. That's something I discovered as well, where like tiki is actually supposed to be a kiki in Hawaiian because and everywhere else is tiki or something like that because the T's essentially were traded out in Hawaii for K's. So yeah, I thought that that's part of the interesting dynamic of it all. Kanaloa was essentially Kanaloa and such. So uh, we have various things, and it's always exciting to experience that. But possibly the most excited I have been, but heartbreakingly so, was discovering the whole thing with the Menehune that I mentioned. Was like that's fake. Wow, it's like, geez, um, I don't know how many people know that. So, but yeah, that's the things that I like is when you actually find a deeper meaning, and that's what I like to. When I discover those things, I like to really underline that and like really bring it home in my episodes where it's like this is why it's important and this is why we need to remember this because most people don't know it and we need to prevent this from being lost to time because there are so many things that have been lost to time that I've discovered. A lot of stories like Puleehu and a lot of these gods and demigods that I share, a lot of the stories have been lost over time. And it hasn't been very long either. I would say like over the 2 or 3 generations and it was gone. So
Mhm.
it's very heartbreaking.
Yeah, it's
I
always a
also
shame
like
to
to,
think. It's always a shame when you think about like there's no way of getting it back either. You can't do like a system restore or something like that. And it's so I think obviously podcasts like yours are obviously really valuable and necessary, I think.
yeah, for example, the Hmong people that they ended up like, they were a culture that was affected by the Vietnam War. They ended up relocating to Northern America and they admit that they've lost a lot of their culture and their stories in 1 or 2 generations. And it's just heartbreaking. It's like, gosh, so horrible. So,
Mm.
but that's the whole part of it, being aware, spreading the awareness and having the mission. So,
Mm. It's interesting how this takes a leap sort of into the digital space because I know that there's some work towards kind of creating like cultural archives for those Pacific islands that are obviously at risk of climate change and so on, and being able to preserve culture, but in like a digital format because like digital formats aren't particularly tangible. And I mean, if you think about it, how many file types can no longer be played now? And I'm always a bit like, oh no, but will that always exist though?
yeah, but also it's the fact that having it on available in different mediums in a in America as well as in Europe, there's a lot of places where we take unlimited data downloads for granted. A lot of places in the Pacific where they actually have metered or capped data or their connection's not good. And that's why I end up like not only doing the podcast, but expanding on my books to have that available for them in different mediums and different formats. So the
Mm,
stories can live on. So,
mm. That's really important, actually. Yeah, having it in some kind of like hard format that you can touch and stuff. Um, but yeah, I was looking through your episode list, I must admit, and there was one that I thought because the podcast is very goth friendly. I felt like I had to ask about this one particular one because I'd rather people went and listened to the podcast for all the other things we've talked about. But can you tell us about Samoa's goddess of bats, please?
Oh, well, yeah, and that's another reason why I love my episodes and that I like is or like the feature is that there's a lot of powerful females that are I really admire. Uh, I was just it's just different, and I really appreciate that women get these stories that they can look up to.
During a time of war between Tonga and Samoa, peace was attempted with the marriage of Tonga's king and a Samoan princess named Leutogi Tupa Te'e, or Leutogi. Leutogi would be his second wife, and she hated leaving her beloved Samoa. Fighting resumed between Tonga and Samoa, but Leutogi was stuck in Tonga. She was resented by her husband, his wife the queen, and the court, who viewed Leutogi's kind heart as a weakness. But the young prince was the worst. He threw things at Leutogi and called her names. Everyone encouraged him to avoid being his next target. Soon, the village followed the court's harsh treatment of the princess, and everyone mistreated her, including her retainer. She avoided the village and spent her days exploring Tonga's beauty with her mocking retainer. The queen used the princess's absence as an example of her laziness. Leutogi didn't care what they said about her and continued her peaceful walks. One day she found a fruit bat with an injured wing. She pitied the terrified animal. Her mocking retainer shoved her aside to kill it. Her eyes flashed, and she ordered him to stand down. He gritted his teeth and complied. Leutogi picked up the bat. "I'll comfort you, and together we won't be alone." She returned to the palace with her bat. Everyone mocked her, but she ignored them and cared for her bat. At night, she enjoyed the cool air with the bat on her lap. She fed it mango, guava, and papaya. She loved the stars, but the northern ones reminded her of Samoa. "I'll probably never see Samoa again." She wept, but her bat's wiggling nose as it munched the sweet fruit made her smile. She told her bat about her beautiful Samoa, shared her people's stories, and sang their songs. The bat's wing healed, and Leutogi knew it was time to say goodbye. She ventured to the forest and braved encountering wrathful night spirits until she found a safe place to release her bat. Its eyes, expecting its sweet dinner, broke her heart. She wiped her tears. "There are no stories tonight, little one, and you must find your own food." She lifted her hands, and the bat flapped away. "Goodbye, little one." Leutogi waited till her bat was gone, wiped her flowing tears, and returned to her village. Leutogi's loneliness slumped her shoulders and shrank her appetite, but she hid her feelings from her unloving king and his court. "You've hardly eaten over the past few days," the queen said during breakfast. "Is our food not good enough for you?" "No." Leutogi grabbed more food. "I must be snacking too much." "I haven't seen that bat of yours." Leutogi stared at her fruit. It healed, and it's back in the forest. The queen chomped her food. It coated her tongue and ran down the edges of her mouth. "Since you have a way with little things, I'm putting you in charge of the prince. Perhaps you may tame him." Leutogi paled and lowered her head. "Very well." Her bed was moved to the child's room, and the queen announced Leutogi was at his beck and call. The prince tormented Leutogi during the day, and his snoring kept her up at night. Fed up, she went outside to embrace the peaceful night. She didn't care about the night spirits, because they couldn't be worse than the royal family and the village. Near the island's coast, something flapped beside her. It was her bat. Leutogi cried with joy, then sang and told it stories. Leutogi's days with the tormenting prince were tolerable because her nights were with her bat. She took her bat the finest fruit and looked forward to seeing it flap to her from the forest. Soon, Leutogi's bat brought other bats to enjoy her sweet fruit, stories, and songs. Days later, Leutogi woke and prepared for the prince's torment. But the prince was pale. She asked if he was all right. "How dare you speak to your master like that?" the prince wheezed. "I'm fine." But Leotogi was concerned. He worsened, and she suggested they see his mother, the queen. He refused. Leotogi requested to see the queen, but the queen said she was busy till after dinner. Leotogi tried caring for the prince, but he refused her and went to sleep early. Then she finally saw the queen. "The prince is your responsibility," the queen said, and dismissed her without hearing what Leotogi wanted to see her about. The princess went to her bats, who welcomed her. She cried to them and wished she had a caring family. Screaming perked her ears. It came from the village, and she ran back. Retainers yelled, "A sickness killed the prince." Leotogi was blamed for neglecting him and leaving his side. The king ordered her to be burned so she could feel his rage. The princess tried explaining herself, but everyone ignored her. Leotogi cried as she was tied to a tree and fire was built around her. As its creeping flames warmed her skin, she faced the stars towards her beloved Samoa and sang. Smoke blocked the stars. An eerie sound froze the villagers. Bats swooped upon them. The villagers scattered as the swarm extinguished the fire, and the fearful people watched the unscathed princess walk from the tree in glowing embers. "She's not normal," they whispered. "Send that wretch back to Samoa to be with her own kind," the queen hissed. "No," the king quivered. "That would make us look weak. Exile her to the offshore island. She'll die in a week on that barren rock, and we'll intercept anyone who approaches." As Tonga and Samoa's war continued, the Tongan king sent Leotogi's retainer to collect her body. The strong current delayed him. He scanned the desolate island's beach, but the setting sun provided little light. He turned to leave, but a woman called his name. Leotogi greeted him and smiled. She was healthier and more beautiful than he remembered. Leotogi's hands went behind her back. "Welcome to my island. I hear the current can be treacherous. Would you like some food or water?" "No, thank you." His voice trembled as he scanned the harsh and barren surroundings. "How about some fruit?" Leotogi produced pieces of luscious papaya. The parched-mouthed retainer imagined eating the fruit, but he stepped back. "Where did you get that from?" Leotogi giggled and pointed to the sky. The retainer fell back into his canoe. She laughed as he fumbled with his paddle and left the island. Her laughter carried on the wind and stopped when he cleared the breakers. An eerie sound drowned out the waves sloshing against his canoe. A cloud of bats blocked the setting sun and converged upon the island. Leotogi welcomed her bats as they swarmed around her and offered their princess food. Leotogi's bat settled in her lap. She fed it pieces of the papaya she offered her retainer as the swarm settled. The princess smiled at her little ones. Here's tonight's story. During a time of war between Tonga and Samoa, peace was attempted with the marriage of Tonga's king and a Samoan princess. I'd just like to note that the Tonga and Samoan feud has lessened, but it's so old no one recalls how or when it started. Also, the location of Leotogi's island is unknown.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, that one is a good one, as well as the Two Grim Reapers. That story is a good one.
Two Grim Reapers.
Yep, China's Two Grim Reapers. There was a story, that's a long story, but it's essentially like one is their best friends that ended up passing away. They were uh, keepers of the law, so essentially constables that were best friends. They're transporting a prisoner who ran off, and when they said, "Oh, we'll meet by the bridge," but it started raining, and one of the friends ended up like drowning in the bridge, or because the flood came up, and so the other one saw his friend's body going downstream, that he felt so bad for being responsible for his death. He ended up hanging himself. And so they took on the characteristics where one is pale white and very tall, the other one is like heavy set and darkened because of all the mud. but the god in the afterlife ended up uh, basically giving them a second chance as their Grim Reapers.
Um, and I think one of the reasons why I wanted to ask about the goddess of bats is here because bats are cool. And I love them, and it's always nice to hear them sort of in any story, really. And this is a bee I've had in my bonnet for a really long time, that there's quite a tendency in a lot of sort of new age thought to say that every goddess is either a mother goddess or a love goddess, which just annoys me on every level because I mean, even in European goddesses, there's a lot more nuance to a lot of them. And without getting on my soapbox, because otherwise I will, does
I
that
don't mind.
same the thing is, to me, straight away, it doesn't apply to the likes of Minerva, but that's another rant for another time. But does this binary that's I think very much imposed on these figures, does that apply to goddesses in the Pacific? Because I'm going to hazard a guess and say not. Um, or does that kind of thing can really simplify incredibly complex figures?
I think that a lot of the reasons why we say it's the goddess of so and so, the goddess of that, or the god of that is just so that people have an understanding. They have a reference point. So, and then you have goddesses from India, like Kali, where it's like the goddess of death, rebirth. And it's like, yeah, but that's a form of a higher god of creation and such. And then you have the whole thing of there's the fertility gods, and that they represent not only death but also life, rebirth, and all that. So it's it's interesting because you have all these gods, goddesses, and entities, and they're trying to identify them. So that's why it's like, in a way, I could see why people want to do that, but at the same time, there's more to it. But then you have other gods and goddesses that are just like, oh, that's pretty same, self-explanatory. Where you have Milu, the god of the underworld. Okay, got it. You have Pele, goddess of fire and volcanoes. But then again, it's like, okay, she's only the goddess of volcanoes then. Well, not really. She's the goddess of fire as well. But she was not the original god of volcano god. And so that's one another aspect as well. So there is complexity, but there's not. Uh, you have great warriors too, demigods and such, like Rena, who was the Melanesian god, or she was a fierce warrior and led her, army of all female warriors at the time. They kicked butt. I refer to her as like essentially the Pacific's female Ghostbusters, so which they essentially were.
Nice.
But yeah, it's like to a degree it can be simplified, but then at the same time, once again, I guess it's the whole migration aspect. You just understand that that's like a placeholder, and then there's other aspects and there's further things to it for the understanding.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think sort of looking at mythology in some ways, the way that people approach certain types of stories is like a modern mythology. And obviously, you mentioned American gods earlier. And obviously, I know you've talked about Batman before. And you described Maui as the Pacific superhero. So I was wondering, do you think that people turn to superheroes like here in the 21st century as a form of modern mythology? And have they in some ways kind of taken over from the gods, or are they something separate?
I think that Grant Morrison said it, who's a comic book writer. Grant Morrison stated that you add superheroes to any story and it makes the story better. You've actually increased the stakes. I feel that gods actually are greater than superheroes, but the issue was with now they're kind of one and the same because Marvel needed to do that because they needed to put Thor on the same level as Captain America. And I understand that that's what they did. Um, but at the same time, a superhero is limited where a god should not be limited. So, for example, one of my clients stated, I help writers and uh, I'm a developmental editor and such. So, one of my clients actually asked me a question about uh, gods. They're like, the god had to go through training. And I said, well, not necessarily. Um, that I feel that what she was implying was more of a modernistic version of things, where it's like you have an individual, society has to go, you grow up and you go through this training and then you do your job. Whereas in the before, it was just they were born and that was it. It was like the seasons. So they don't really need any training. So for modern myths and everything, there's a lot of things that reflect the culture and a lot of things that, and this is once again going back to what we were stating of migrations, religions, gods, all migrating to different things and reflecting the host culture at the time, changing, evolving, but yet remaining the same. Names change, um, appearances change, but then they are the same being, but in a different form. Once again, American Gods did this. I like the way that American Gods did this with the season one, where they ended up having the different Jesuses, and that's essentially what it boils down to. You have these different cultures, these different beliefs, and they have a working myth of something that reflects their culture. I wrote a book about that genre analysis where I analyzed Batman through the ages, and it essentially was reflecting how Batman, the Christopher Nolan series, was reflecting a post 9/11 world. I went through all these aspects, but even before then, I analyzed Batman, how he reflected American culture through the ages. During World War II, he actually went up against a character that only showed up once through the serials or through a serial, and never showed up again. And he was essentially a Japanese professor. I believe he was a Japanese version of Fu Manchu. So, but once again, that's what makes a working modern myth of something reflecting the host culture.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that to a degree, superheroes do that. They are the stories now, but that's because, in all honesty, I also feel that God and goddess is kind of a touchy subject for people because people want to tread carefully and not disrespect a culture, a belief, a religion. So a superhero or superheroine is the answer, safe ground.
Mm-hmm.
Because if not, you're gonna be like me and do a lot of research on things for like small things and discover, wow, I did all that research for nothing because there's not a lot written about that individual. Right. And now I'm back to square zero and I got a story. I got an episode coming up that's due. So,
I love the way you're sort of telling like the glamorous life of the folklorist.
oh, yeah. People have no idea how much research goes on. They have no idea. They're just like, oh, there's no episode this week. That sucks. And meanwhile, we're just folklorists are like, ah, ah. So,
So do you think that popular culture, like, and it does tend to get ragged on quite a lot by people, but do you think it can actually help introduce wider audiences to like the original stories? Like how many people went off and read about Norse mythology thanks to Thor and then realized, wow, this is not the same Thor. Um, or do you think that popular culture has the potential to introduce too much misinformation, which was the issue that Morgan Daimler raised with D&D now providing like the whole cold iron thing into fairy folklore, sort of, or are stories just going to morph every time you retell them anyway? So we probably shouldn't worry.
see, and that is the whole reason why one of the reasons why I created Legends from the Pacific and why I'm doing all this hair pulling research for, you know, very little. It's like, oh, but it's because you talk to somebody about a story and it's like a non a lesser known story, I should say. A lesser known story, for example, Pele or an Asian folklore story, and you'll have several different versions. That was annoying for me because it's like, no, it's this version because it explains this, this, this. And they're like, oh no, well, that's not what I heard. But that is the reason why I did it because I'm like, no, this is all my research. This is all my evidence to show that this is sort of a definitive version of this story. And I wanted to share that before it's lost because of all the research, all the scholarly articles, all the interviews that I've done, everything that I've done. It's like we have to respect this and honor this before it's lost. And that is the whole point. It's there's just a lot of people will end up trying to do things to fit their agenda. Okay, so for example, right? Okay, so this is one thing that I have that sort of annoyed me, where it's like um, with Hawaii 5-0, this is they're pretty much taking our culture and specifically our language, and they're they used haole derogatorily, um, where it's like people are like, oh my gosh, but they did that because they're like, we can use haole as a curse word, uh, treat it like a curse word and get around the censors. And it's like, okay, you know, that kind of rubbed me the wrong way because it's like, haole is not necessarily a negative term. Haole just means without breath. And in fact, I mentioned that in one of my episodes where Hawaiians, Hawaiian blooded Hawaiians were actually referred to as howlies back in the day because when during the whaling times when the Hawaiians were going away from the islands and meeting people and giving birth to their kids, they were not born in Hawaii, so they were referred to as howlies or not from here because that's the original term or the original definition. So the Kama'aina was the ones that were Hawaiians that were born in Hawaii, and we refer to haole as basically white. So not just a color, but a descriptor. So we have, the whole wheat brownies, the blonde brownies. We refer to them as haole brownies, and it's like, okay, fine. And for me and others that are mixed, were considered hapa haole, so mixed haole. Or we have Asian. So if you're like essentially have, I am part Hawaiian, Asian, as well as Caucasian. So because of that Caucasian aspect of me, that people can call me Hapa Haole or mixed Caucasian. And it's like, yeah, but I'm also Asian and Native Hawaiian. So, and so by that's another aspect of what I'm getting at is like how modern pop culture can actually get something, one aspect from like a culture, reinterpret it to their means, and then essentially the populace taking it and running with it. And it's just like, oh, that's so bad. But at the same time, you'll have shows like myself and your show as well, where it brings awareness. And it's like, this is the truer definition and what is going on behind the scenes. So we're available for those people that want to do the additional research, that want to do the additional look instead of the first glance thing. I mean, it's funny because when I mention to people that I'm Hawaiian, they're like, "Oh, I've seen Moana," and I'm like, "Cool, yeah." Uh, and they're like, "Oh, well, yeah. What it is that? Is that correct? And that correct? And that correct?" And he's like, "How did you learn English?" And I'm like, I was taught it. That was my first language. So yeah, but I think that it's good, and what people do with the information out there that's available, that's the big question. And I think that if something becomes popular that is culturally correct or as culturally correct as possible, that's a bonus. And that's what people should be striving for. Instead of reevaluating things, because the reevaluation of things and changing things for their own agenda, I think that's where people start getting messed up and things start getting skewed, especially when that thing becomes a hit or becomes popular. And I think as creators, we should be aware of that. But I understand that not all of us are, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah. On that note, yeah, I think I agree with everything you just said, really. And I think obviously there is that thing of it depends at what point somebody comes into something. So if their first exposure to something is what's popular, who will stay at that level and who will then be like, oh yeah, a new rabbit hole to fall down and then tumble down and then find all the stuff that lies underneath, which is way more interesting as well. You know, luckily I think a lot of my listeners very much like the rabbit hole. So you know, they'll I just it's quite nice introducing them to you because then they can go off and learn about all this other stuff that I don't cover. You know, not being from the Pacific.
I hope that my listeners are like that, where they appreciate the rabbit hole. But I feel that that they also might be like, well, he's done the research. That's it. We're good. He's done the 30 hours, so we don't for this 12-minute episode, so we don't have to do that. It's like, yeah, all right.
Oh, there is always that, isn't there? So, bearing in mind we've talked a lot about research, what is it that you're working on at the moment?
I am working on my series. I have a series that I've been working on for decades, which is actually another reason why I've done the podcast. I have I'm always working on my podcast, and I'm working on getting the book versions of those out. My audiobook was great because Emily Wu Zeller worked on it with me. She's a very accomplished voice actress. So that audiobook is really good. And if you, yeah, I mean, I'd say that that's pretty much all the things that I could say right now. There are other things that I was like, oh shoot, I could tell Icy about this, and I'm like, no, I can't. I was like, oh, I almost said it too. I was just like, oh yeah, funny you should mention that. There's this right. Yeah, no, never mind.
You tease.
We are good. We are so good. I was I was so close to saying it too. I was just like, few things. I was like, oh yeah, there's no, no. There was a good pause where I almost told you like, you're gonna have to delete that. I'm sorry. So it's like, oh yeah. So
Everyone should come and follow you online then to find out these things when you can announce them.
yeah, in fact, just come and visit me at Legends from the Pacific. And in fact, if you wanted to hear the first story of my ghost encounter with the faceless Mujia at the famous Waialae Drive-In, just go to legendsfromthepacific.com/gift. And you could get that. It's an audio thing. Yeah, it is an audio thing. I just realized. I'm like, oh, it might be a PDF. I'm so used to PDFs now. It's like, no, it's an audio thing. Yeah, it's an MP3 thing. Yeah. So you could download that. And yeah, and if whatever, I'm very accessible. We can contact me, geek out. Sure, it's no big deal. Um, I always do that. It's like, oh yeah. Then there'll be times where it's like, this is a long email. Next episode. Yeah. So I'd like to thank so and so for writing in. These are my replies. Cool. Done. So.
Nice.
But yeah, legendsfromthepacific.com. That's the best way to get in touch with me. And then once again, legendsfromthepacific.com/gift. Because that's nowhere. That is not listed anywhere. So,
Cool.
well, yeah, it's a gift for me to your listeners. So
Awesome. I'll put the links. I don't know. I always point downwards because obviously that's where the show notes are on YouTube, and then I
right.
hit myself every time I do it. But I'll put the
Well,
I'll put the links below.
well, we also have the audio version too.
This is
So
true.
you have to be like,
Pointing.
yeah. So you'd be like, oh, I also put the links down below. I see, just pointed down. So it's like, yes, okay, cool.
Yeah, it's funny how often that comes up because I know in the episode I did with Sean about Atlantis, Sean had to keep describing my facial expressions for the people who were only listening, and I keep
Yeah,
forgetting
yeah.
that obviously it's sometimes it's radio, not video.
It's interesting because you said it's kind of funny also because you said it's interesting how much that comes up when you're pointing down. See, I'm a professional magician, you know. You have to understand. The thing that separates us professionals from the amateurs is we know all the bad jokes. So yeah. Even the ones that go over like in a lead balloon. It's great. You know, that's the you have to understand as speaking as a magician, there's a bunch of magic tricks that I will do flat out because people ask me about that. They're like, why do you do that trick? I'm like, for the bad jokes. I mean, you have to understand there are some things that I do just for myself, just for my enjoyment. Because if you're doing a trick for like several times a night and it's like it gets, you know, it gets a little much. It gets a little tired after a while. So it's like, all right, we're doing this. We're doing this. You're coming along with me because you're gonna like it because it's magic. I do some cool things, but at the same time, I get to say really bad jokes. So it's a win-win. Everybody's happy. So.
Excellent. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. You are welcome back anytime.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Icy.
And I've
I
no doubt that we'll probably continue chatting and geeking about other stuff at some point in the future.
I mean, we could just continue right now. You could just like edit this part and be like, okay, bye. And then be like, all right, so welcome to this new episode. This is a totally new episode, even though we're wearing the same things. It's like, great. It's awesome. So,
Oh, well, anyway, I will have to stop recording. So I will see you soon.
all right.
Well, thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, feel free to leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts because that helps other people find the show too. It also takes between 4 and 6 hours to research, write, record, and edit these episodes. So if you want to help support my time in doing that, then you can buy me a coffee. Or you can join the Fabulous Folklore family on Patreon and enjoy extra benefits, including exclusive episodes and articles and even illustrated talks. All the links you need are below, and thanks in advance.